Well, let's speak to someone who has never deleted a WhatsApp message, I'm sure. Our deputy political editor, Sam Coates, is currently rolling his eyes in Westminster. When did politicians discover the joys of using WhatsApp? It does seem to me to be a fairly recent invention, but was it around pre-COVID in the way in which we see it now?
Oh, yeah, no, it absolutely was. But you're right. WhatsApp as a platform sort of first crossed my radar in, I don't know, about 2011, 2012. And then it didn't take off in politics. And then it burst onto the scene in late 2015, really just in time for the Brexit referendum. And that's when you noticed politicians starting to use it. And there was a seminal moment after the 2016 Brexit referendum where politics was changed forever by WhatsApp. There was the first big, significant, influential, powerful grouping based around a WhatsApp group. And that was the group of Brexiteers, hardline Brexiteers from the European Research Group, our old friends on the Tory right, the ERG. And they organised themselves in a WhatsApp group in a way that at that point, when they did it, had never happened before. It was a really unsexily titled the DEXEU, name of the Department for Leaving the EU, DIT, Department for International Trade, the DEXEU DIT Support Group ERG, right? That, at one point, it had 70, 80 members, and it was just the most phenomenally powerful thing in British politics.
Powerful in what way? Powerful in what way? In terms of kind of corralling MPs together for exchange of information, what?
This group basically held Theresa May's government hostage because all of a sudden you had 40, 50, 60, 70, which critically was more than the majority that Theresa May had inherited from David Cameron. And at a stroke, you know, if all this group acted as one, and they did, then the organisers of the group, like Steve Baker, now of course a government minister, could just say, go out on the airways, complain about this, tweet about this, take to the radio, take to the telly, accept media, or if they wanted to really demonstrate their power and Number 10 was nervous, Number 10 might come to them and go, we're really terrified about you kicking off. And the ERG would go, well, we won't in exchange for this concession or that concession, at which point the message would go out on the ERG WhatsApp group to be silent, to not rebel, to not cause problems. And on days where the ERG chose to rebel, you know, you could feel Westminster shaking. It would be the front page story in every newspaper. If it was allayed to a vote, then you would get a real sense the government wouldn't win the vote. And it was the first example I ever saw of an organising principle being transformed by a technological platform. And it was a really, really important development.
Yeah, hugely important, hugely important. But then, of course, it almost seemed to be used just by the rank and file backbenchers as a place for airing their grievances with some pretty some pretty predictable results.
Yeah, and so what happened post-2017, and this has sort of sludged its way into our politics today, is that WhatsApp groups became just commonplace in all sorts of different bits of British politics. So, you know, there's a WhatsApp group for what colour pyjamas you wear in the morning. There's probably a WhatsApp group if you don't wear pyjamas in the morning. Everything in your life has a... has a WhatsApp group. So whether it's Conservative Party MPs, Labour Party MPs who, you know, like Jeremy Corbyn, don't like Jeremy Corbyn, like Brexit, right? So, and you know, in a bigger WhatsApp group, it became more and more possible that exchanges would be screenshot and then leaked. And in a big WhatsApp group, if somebody said something toxic, silly, funny, rude, contentious, then actually, over time, we realised that there probably was quite a big chance of something leaked. It's not just screenshots, Neil. This is the point. If you put your entire life, all your private thoughts, all your secret desires, all your temporary dislikes, all your, you know, exploding kind of moments of fury into your WhatsApp, and it stays there on both your phone and the person you sent it to or the group that you sent it to, and anybody who's got your 6-digit PIN could get access to it. It's incredibly unsafe and it's incredibly stupid. So that's the first thing that happened. People learned that everything could leak. And then there were these inquiries, which I suspect is why you're asking me all these questions today. Inquiries basically found that they could compel people to hand over their WhatsApps that I think pretty much people thought were likely to be private. Now that's
on that point, why on earth would they think that they were private? Why on earth would they think if it was, say for example, a phone that was handed back into Labour HQ, it's a party phone, it doesn't belong to you, ministers, you know, they're in WhatsApp groups on those phones. I mean, why would they ever think that the stuff, which, and we've mentioned this on the podcast already, you can apply under the Freedom of Information Act to gain access to these communications. Why would they think that no one would ever see them? I mean, it just strikes me as daft.
You know, conversations in corridors in Westminster are never recorded.
Yeah, fair point.
You know, half thoughts on WhatsApp meant very casually. Should they form part of the public record? You know, it's a lot less clear to me. It seems like a lot grayer area. But the precedent that feels like it's being set is that if it's on WhatsApp, it comes out, and that is the thing that's caused difficulty for Boris Johnson, difficulty and a half for Dominic Cummings, and at the moment is causing difficulty for Nicola Sturgeon because she hasn't got any to hand over.
But doesn't it? Haven't we found ourselves in a rather fascinating position where some of the most senior politicians in the land, Prime Minister, First Minister, so on, you know, almost have a kind of a Rebecca Vardy approach to data security. You know, phones have been dropped into seas, messages have just disappeared. The First Minister, for example, said all the way back in 2021, yeah, of course you can have my WhatsApps, whilst she was deleting them. I mean, shouldn't we expect more of our politicians, particularly in times of national crisis, when they all knew, or they should have assumed, there's a public inquiry coming and all this stuff is going to be dragged into the spotlight?
Let me just put it's not quite the counterpoint to that, but the sort of complicated situation that we've now got ourselves into, right? You know, politics is dynamic. People change their behaviour on the basis of what they see and read and, you know, what's reported. And people see these inquiries coming along. So what has everybody done? What has everybody done? They've turned on disappearing messages. So I still get the same absolutely ridiculous messages from people in government, but they just automatically expire after 7 days or 30 days or 1 day or whatever. Now, my question to you, Neil, is that any better? I mean, just because it's formalised, because it, like... And a lot of email policies are not that dissimilar. I think actually all of this is a grey area. What makes it okay if it's automatically deleted?
Nothing, absolutely nothing. I mean, I suppose that the answer that I would give is, yeah, I kind of expect our politicians to be performing in a different fashion to, for example, private, you know, publicly traded media companies when it comes to retention of important information. But we find ourselves now in a situation with politicians having switched on this disappearing message function, that this stuff is lost to the ether. Isn't the solution to this that if government officials or ministers or politicians are using WhatsApp, that they switch that off? That if this is going to be a means by which people in government communicate on topics of significance, that they're not allowed to do that?
I don't know the answer, but I know the problem with where you're coming from, which is you are asking us all to delineate in clear and clean lines, like how we live our lives, right? Sometimes I message you, Niall Paterson, about work, about the time I'm going to walk into the studio, whether I need to wear a tie, whether I need to behave myself. Maybe if, you know, that would be needed for the record, okay? Sometimes I message you about my private life, and we don't go into details about that, but I would not expect that to go into the public record. And sometimes it's a bit of a grey area where maybe I'm just having a bit of a whinge. Now transfer that example to government, right? If you're doing the first thing, isn't that different to the second thing, and isn't that different to the third thing? You know, maybe we require, like, politicians have like a different phone for government business where they know everything's happening, but the odd bit of communication will be on the other phone. I don't have a solution, but I find it hard to think that the genie can go back in the bottle in quite such a straightforward way.
So here's the final question to you, Sam. As a result of, you know, these WhatsApp groups being leaked, as a result of there being a real focus at the COVID inquiry and in other inquiries, of course, about the use of WhatsApp and the revelations that there have been, do you think in future there will be more or less transparency about the manner in which politicians arrive at decisions?
Can we just acknowledge the counterfactual, right? 20 years ago, or 40 years ago, or 30 years ago, there would be zero transparency about conversations in corridors, right? Now, we have a few extra things due to technological advance that may or may not continue to be available to us as the years go on. Although we also have to acknowledge that one message from one person which makes it to the public domain often can create a completely misleading impression because it doesn't come with the context of the person sending it and the person receiving it. So it actually can be a completely false flag as well. Context is everything. Context is removed by social media. So your question was about proper transparency. I think it's always been limited, and I think that technological advance and then like behavioural change as a result of what we've seen means it will just continue to take other forms. We just, you know, I don't know, but I think there hasn't been total transparency ever, and nor will there ever be. But there will always be a tension between the retention of huge and increasingly huge amount of data about every individual's lives, what they're prepared to see in the public domain, what we think of as the line between public and private, and just the fact that some of this stuff is just dangerous when it gets out because people totally misinterpret it.
Sam Coates, thanks very much indeed. And I'm sending my thanks in permanent form and not in a deleted message.